Hello, hello. Welcome to the Off the Tools podcast with me, Andy Jones, and my co-host,
Mr. Wayne Bettis. How are we doing, gents? How is everybody? Well, some of you might have noticed that Andy did the intro there. So well done, Andy. First time anyone has ever done an intro on the podcast that's not me.
So we're doing something a bit different today, aren't we?
Yeah. No, tell it. Kick it off, Andy. Kick it off. The floor is yours.
Thought we'd break things up a little bit with doing this one as sort of a general chit chat / chat about just the industry and where things are with it, but just also a bit of a general chit chat with me and Wayne having a bit of a waffle. But yeah, just I've always got plenty to say about the industry, including on the forums. So I figured it was a good break in some of the more serious podcasts that we've been doing to just have a general tradesman to tradesman discussion. Really?
Yeah. I'm excited, and I've got contradictory views on everything. So it's going to be quite an interesting discussion for myself to sort of process my actual thoughts on the current sort of like state of everything, because on one hand, I'm pessimistic and I look around and I see so many people working very, very hard and never really sort of getting anywhere. But then on the other hand, I see people absolutely smashing it and the opportunities out there with regards to the skills gaps that are just growing, in the generations as everyone comes through. So yeah, I'm probably, going to be contradicting myself as we talk through today, I think, because I haven't got like just one viewpoint on it. But where should we start? Like, I'll just start. So last year was probably, from my perspective, the slowest year that I had felt, not just for my own plumbing business, because I had my own stuff going on. For those that don't know, it was quite a challenging year. So I'm not just relying on my reference point there, but obviously I work and speak with a lot of people. And overall, it seemed like last year was quite a challenging year. There was lots of people that were quiet and having to take a few steps backwards rather than sort of push forward. What was your take on last year, Andy?
So I've actually made a few notes for today, but we'll hit this first. So in terms of flow of work, I'm just going to start with something that seems to be quite a prevalent fact for me, that I have so many of our mentees I've had this conversation with. It's my belief now that moving forward, there will be a divide in the industry that will culminate with the controversial statements. So I'm looking forward to having some conversations with some other lads. Will encourage you to all get in touch with me and Wayne and give your thoughts on this. But I believe that in the next 10 years, the realm of the sole trader style, or the old school sole trader style business, will be almost extinct if they don't evolve. And by that, I mean, if you're not using software, using a call answering process, whether that's AI, VA, in-house admin, then you will no longer be able to compete, because for the businesses that are doing it properly, so let's put the scenario out in place. We live in a world of Amazon Prime type people. Let's say, you order something, you get it the next day, when it's coming, you get the text when he's walking up the drive, I'm on my way up, keep your pets out the way, whatever that text is. So you're so in the loop with that, whether you order something on Uber Eats, you can do the tracking. Whereas, so somebody rings the local traditional sole trader and he's on a job, he's under a boiler, he can't answer his phone. I'll deal with that in a bit. People are so impatient now, they won't stand for that anymore. Different maybe if it's a long-standing customer. If that's a new customer looking for a new tradesman, what are they going to do? They're going to ring someone else. And if it's the same scenario for the next sole trader, then they're going to ring someone else until they run into a business that has, let's say they've got an admin person answering the phone. They'll pick the phone up, bang, they're already ahead of the game. They might use a quoting software, but more primarily, they probably use a job management software. They book the job in, they get a text and an email confirmation. They ain't going back to the sole trader guy now. That's it. That's
Hell
it.
no.
So they're locked in now. They'll pay that little bit more for the guarantee of answering the phone, text and whatnot, to be in the loop, text when the engineer's on his way. So what's happening is customers are migrating to these small to medium-sized businesses because the retention rate for these companies are so good, because they're offering what people want. So a lot of the guys that are talking, to come back to your question, a lot of the guys that are discussing, like, you know, I'm quiet this year, I'm quieter than I was last year, things like that. It's my belief and strong opinion, based on my research and our students that we talk to, that is possibly one of the biggest contributors to why you simply cannot run things the way you used to, because people won't suffer it anymore. People just won't. And it's a shame, because a lot of guys don't know that there's another way. You know, most of our mentees in Off the Tools were completely unaware of what's capable from having a trade in your trade business. And because they've always viewed it as, well, I'm a tradesman with a business. And my sort of thing at the minute is to try and tell all of the lads to view it the other way around. I own a business. Yes, I can be an operator in it, because I'm you know, a gas engineer or electrician, but it needs to be run as a business. But ultimately, what will happen over the next 10 years is these businesses that are doing it properly will grow. They will acquire more and more customers, like the scenario I've just mentioned, and the ability for the sole trader guys that aren't using call answering and softwares will diminish, because they will lose customers over time. And the other side of that is, I'll stop for a breath in a minute, but the other side of that, the double-edged sword to that, the other side is, and this is a compound effect as well, because as they start to lose more customers through the means I've just explained, they become more in more protection mode, even more for the customers they have got. Therefore, they won't increase the prices. So what happens then is inflation will erode the value of the existing customers that they've got. They become too scared to lift the prices. So what happens? They will pay for inflation on behalf of the customer year on year. So the 60 quid boiler service becomes, in real world terms, 57 quid. Then it becomes 53 quid. And then it's actually, now I'm struggling to pay. And what you'll find is a lot of the lads that are out there looking for a job now, the lads that are currently self-employed, because unfortunately they just can't operate anymore. And when it's left too late, fortunately, you know, the lads that come into Off the Tools have managed to grab it, have put urgency in place and grab it now before that happens. But the lads that wait a bit longer, they also then have no reserve capital to invest in something like software. So it becomes too late then, and now they no longer have decisions, or they no longer have options for their decision. It's actually, now I have to get a job.
It's now being forced into
which
definitely.
is a shame. But
I see it as a bit of a reset. I think one of the things that has fueled this sort of situation has been the ease of self-employment. So if you go back 25 years, you know, there was lots of medium-sized businesses rather than hundreds of small sole traders. And whereas now you've got, so 25 years ago, there seemed to be more companies that employed people and less one-man bands, you know, that there was these sort of smaller to medium enterprises. Whereas now it's harder to find those medium companies because so many people have had it easy the last 15 years of being self-employed because they haven't had to put the same level of work in that maybe someone had to do in the 80s and 90s to generate that business. And I see it as a bit of a leveler. What's going on? I think in one way, I think it's good because it means that people that are serious about business and serious about delivering a great service to customers and building a great life for themselves will have the opportunity, because the people that are treating it a bit like as a bit of fun and not treating it serious are gonna go down that trap that you just explained. They're gonna get priced out. They're gonna lose customers. They're gonna lose income due to inflation. They're going to just, word of mouth just isn't, every year that goes by, word of mouth is sort of less and less a thing. You go back 25 years ago, word of mouth was the prominent source of work. You did a good job in a street, you owned that street, you got it. Now you barely even say hello to your neighbor, let alone have a 10-minute conversation about who you recommend. And you also get, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm also seeing it a lot more, and I'm doing this myself. I'm less and less likely to recommend someone because I don't want it to tar me and my business with something, because I know how these other people are operating. So like when someone asks me, do I know a builder? I'm like, no, not really. When it, like a few years ago, I'd have been more encouraged to say, yeah, I know this guy or whatever. And because you're worried about that reputation damage by association.
Yeah. I'm just laughing at that because I was in the office for the heating business the other day, training up a new member of staff, and somebody was on the phone. My office manager was on the phone to a customer, and they asked for a recommendation for another trade. And her advice was to go online, use something like Checker Trade or Google Business, a search online essentially for that exact reason, because there's a lot of risk. But just to double back a little bit, that was actually my point number 2 on my notes about that.
Oh, sorry.
No, it segues perfectly to it, because it's one of them things that we're in strong agreement on, like many things. But I sort of coin it as the accidental business owner phrase.
Yes, yeah.
So many guys, because it's so easy. It has been so easy over the last 20 years to, I don't like, let's say I work for British Gas. I'm fed up of it. I don't like it. I don't like the metrics. I don't like the targets that I have to achieve, whatever it might be. Fuck it. I'm just going to go on my own. Because it's been so easy to just go on your own, start, build up a bit of a round after work at the weekend, word of mouth, as you said, build it up, and then crack on your own. So there's most of the lads that are doing that. They actually don't want a business. They just, look on the forums. Like most guys will come in and say, I'm not bothered about having a business. I don't want a business. I'm happy just being me. Unfortunately, that realm is ending. So they're not going to be able to operate, and it's a shame. And I've sort of, as you said before, I'm sort of maybe the firmer hand from the two of us with it, because it's like, well, you need to really think about what's coming from things. So the guys that say, I don't want a business, you need to make a decision. Like, even if you want to stay on your own, just you on your own, you still need to up your game. Because it's not enough. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a business, but you're going to have to put something in place to do the calls, some sort of job management software in place. Otherwise, you'll no longer have the luxury, like you said, of just being able to have a job working for yourself. The flip side of that is that something else that I've harped on and on about is, I would argue that at least 50% of the lads that are self-employed, when it's just them on their own, would be far better off with a job. Not just in the stuff that you would normally think of in a job, such as pension, sick pay, holiday pay, security, van supplied, etc., but financially as well.
So a lot of people,
many of them. I say so many of them are
we're
probably
getting
only pulling like 30 odd grand a year when the going rate for a job's 40 plus for a gas engineer.
Yeah. And I think this is where employers need to. So I believe there's going to be a huge, and we spoke about this, and I know you agree, huge transition from people that are self-employed currently moving back into employment. But I think those companies that are going to maximize that are going to be the owners that will embrace maybe a more modern approach on that, so a bit more flexibility. So I believe that if you asked 90% of small businesses why they went self-employed, they're gonna answer money for one, and time as the second, and the third one, freedom. The freedom to do the school run, to meet a mate for lunch, or have the Friday off because they don't want to work. So, which is why Off the Tools tagline is crafting more time, freedom, and profit. Those desires are still going to be there in these people. It's just going to be harder for them to achieve it. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if employers or future employers can embrace a bit of that element and understand that maybe, you're going to have to be flexible on, maybe it's not a set salary you offer someone now. Maybe there's a lot more money incentive or time incentive. You complete 6 paid jobs a day. Guess what? You can finish at 2 on a Friday. Is a simple one. Or you take on an extra job and you earn 50 quid or 50% or whatever it might be. And then also the encouraging, I think in essence, what I'm trying to say here is the biggest market to employ people over the next coming years, I believe, is going to be those that have been out on their own and coming back to employment. If you want to snag the good ones and build a team of people that want to be there, you're going to have some flexibility. The strict 8 till 5, half-hour lunch break type role, I think, has to change with the change in people's lifestyles, the change in perspectives. So it could be that you have a guy that needs to do the school run because the missus works, and one of the main reasons he went self-employed was so that he could do the school run and whatever, so why not negotiate? Why not agree, okay, well, start at 9:30, work till 5, but do 2 Saturday mornings a month, so the hours clock back up. There's lots of creative ways that you can still have the ability to give someone a little bit more money, a little bit more freedom, and a little bit more time control. And I see so many people hire people and treat it like the military, and I feel that is one of the biggest stumbling blocks when people start to employ, is that they want it regimented. And I understand that you're trying to run a business, you're trying to operate, and I get that. But anyone that employs people knows how hard it is to find someone that is half decent. So when you do find that person that is half decent, you've got to bend a little bit. There has to be some flexibility, and embracing that. Those that embrace that, I believe, will be the ones that go from 1 or 2 men to 10 to 15, because why wouldn't you? If you could earn more money, have a less stressful life, but still have some of that luxury of being able to do the social family stuff that you want to do, and not feel like you're just being a bitch, basically, to somebody. Excuse the crude term, but you know the point I'm trying to make. That is the key. So over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've subconsciously embraced that. I've taken people on in the roles that give them the ability to earn more money, gives them the ability to have flexible working time so that they can do the things that they need to do. It might be going to pick their nan up or take their nan out for lunch on a Thursday, or whatever it might be. Ultimately, if the jobs are being done and customers are happy, it doesn't really matter how that's achieved, does it? If that means that the engineer is quite happy to work till 7 o'clock on a Wednesday because they don't have commitments, but it means that on a Friday they like to knock off at 4 because they want to make sure they they're back to see their kids and whatever, then it's a no-brainer to me. You've got to build flexibility into these roles to keep people for the long term. So yeah, I know people will disagree. People will be like, well, they've got a job, you know, blah, blah, blah. But that's just my take on it. My gut instinct is that those that embrace that more modern way will thrive a lot more than those that are sort of clinging on to the job for life mentality.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that, because we actually do the same thing. We do have one of our engineers who has a really strong bond with one of his kids in particular, who had some health problems when he was a bit younger, and he does the school run every morning religiously. Has to be daddy on the school run, never wavers on it. So therefore he starts at 9:15.
Yeah,
so much bit later. We also offer, and again, that's the flexibility side. From the financial side, I mean, we pay quite strong anyway, but from the flexibility side, we because of how our pricing structure for Saturday work, we then pay the engineers £100 per job on a Saturday, which is, you know, if you want to do it, if you want to really ramp your salary up, and have that ability like you would have done when you were self-employed to actually, we're looking at going on maybe a slightly nicer holiday this year. I can forward plan now. I'm on a salary, but I want to just, you know, I want to upgrade the hotel. You know, I want to go all in on this holiday because it's, you know, it's a 40th birthday or whatever it might be. To do a few Saturdays over the year, you can easily pull another couple of grand. Which is something that would normally be exclusive to either being self-employed or perhaps doing some foreigners on a Saturday. If you do have a job, having said that, and that this is again why if the employers think a little bit outside the box, if they like, I would argue that £100 per job for Saturday stuff is a lot more than employed lads would probably charge per job as a foreigner.
Anyway, yeah,
you're with me on that one. So it's kind of like a win-win, really. It gets the business another customer, so that's a win for the business, and then it gets the engineer some extra pocket money as well. But absolutely, you have to be fluid, because like the funny thing about this industry is you're not employing corporate people. You're employing lads who, even if they had a job previously for another company, it's still not on the same like platform as an office-based job. There's always flexibility to it. You know, you're at the end of the day, you're generally employing, there's some females in the industry, but generally you're employing lads who are lads. You're not employing your perhaps quiet office corporate job type person. You know what I mean? And anyone who is in this industry will understand what I mean by that. There's a bit more masculinity, a bit more stubbornness, maybe some more testosterone flying around. So you have to be accepting that it isn't going to be a structured type. It isn't a structured industry. It's just it's a role that's going to require that flexibility, because it goes both ways as well, doesn't it? You know what I mean? If there's going to be, with the best will in the world, you're never going to be able to operate on a standard everyday finish time. There's always going to be flexibility. Put that boiler back together, and then a joint leaks because you didn't put, the right O-ring in, or you didn't put the O-ring in. It's there in front of you. Shit, I didn't put that back in. Now I've got to strip the boiler back down again. You can't just turn your computer off and go home at 5 o'clock like a normal role. So it requires flexibility on both sides for sure.
And you mentioned about the testosterone and the emotions and everything. Now, it's a very good point, because I think people forget that when they're a boss as well, is that person that's turning up, right, will have their own life stresses, their own niggles, their own maybe mental health challenges, and understanding and having compassion isn't a weakness, and when you've got someone working for you, being able to read that person and understand that you're not, because it's easy. We all think our world is the hardest, and you know, no one knows what it's like. But whether you're employed, whether you're self-employed, whether you're the business owner, everyone struggles. So understanding and having good support systems in a business is also key to growing, I believe, because you could lose a good guy because you've not read that he's struggling at the minute, or that he's under pressure at home, or whether he's, you know, overweight and lost momentum in life, and whatever it might be. I believe that incorporating all of that, and I think corporate companies have got better with that, haven't they? You know, they have programs, they have gyms at work, they, you know, obviously I understand it's a lot more difficult for a smaller business, but it's also one of the factors that is important to note and be aware of, isn't it?
Definitely. And then just on a sort
move to the mic.
Move to the mic.
That's better.
All right. Yeah, but I think another thing as well to be mindful of is that each individual component, you know, in our scenarios, engineers, they're going to be, by definition, an individual component. They're all individuals. They all have their own thing. Yeah. And trying to be rigid, like you were saying before, like in a corporate role, isn't going to work. So you need to be accepting, oh, this guy, he might want to start later. This guy might want to start even earlier. You know, he might want to get to site for 8 o'clock. He might not be able to leave his house till 9 o'clock. Plus, there's going to be guys who, again, have different skill sets. It's about not expecting too much. Because again, and we'll come back to this in a second, you're saying about the skill levels changing. But there's going to be guys who, like I was when I was on the tools, who were good at service and breakdown, diagnostic type work, but was not particularly skilled or fast, rather, at installation side of things.
Yeah.
But then you're going to get the other way around. So it's about not trying to expect too much. But one really prevalent point, and you're going to get a lot of the conversation on the forums, and again, something that's probably going to be potentially a trigger point. I would argue most of the guys that say they don't want to go anything beyond just themselves, they probably don't have the pricing structure in place that would lend to taking someone else on. Because again, if you're not charging accordingly, either A, you can't take someone on because there isn't enough money in the business. There isn't enough money per job, because you need to then, whatever your, when you send that person out, you have to look at what the turnover is going to be for them and then strip away the 80 grand it's going to cost you to put them in a van for the year. Most guys probably aren't charging properly for that. And as a result, they look at it and go, well, it's not actually viable for me to take someone on. But then what happens as well, the guys that manage to maybe just sneak into doing it, they then do expect too much of that guy. They're going to try and give them those 7, 8, 9 jobs a day, potentially more, just to try and make ends meet. Like, you know, there's a lot of guys that I know they're putting engineers out on 10 jobs a day because they're charging so little, they have to put them on 10 jobs a day. Whereas then all that's going to happen is the engineers either going to burn out or get pissed off.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're charging double the rate, without going into conversation about conversions and things, but if you're charging twice as much, you only have to do half as many, technically less, because not to go into the nuances of travel time and fuel and all that, but technically you could do, if you charge double, you could do 4.5 jobs a day and still make the same money, you know what I mean? No downtime from traveling, no fuel costs, etc. And the engineer is going to be happier, the customer is going to be happier because the value is better. They're not rushing in and out the house. There's time to have a chat with the customer and things like that. The solution to a lot of guys' problems, that guys that have maybe got 1 or 2 engineers and it doesn't seem to be working, is often maybe letting one of them go, having a reset and increasing your prices.
We spoke about that unpopular opinion, but in a lot of cases, it's the solution, isn't it? Yeah.
Because
To
again, we
get
spoke
back on track a bit, because we're going down a little bit sort of a rabbit hole there. Like, let's get back to sort of like generalization, because we're getting a bit nuanced in that discussion. So obviously this year there's some big changes, isn't there, on the self-employment side with making tax digital and that. So it would seem, so just to be clear, right, I don't agree with the government on much, right? Generally, I'm anti-establishment and anti-control just on everything. That's like my sort of default position. But on this front, I don't know too much about it because I've been digital for 12 years, 15 years, whatever. So it makes no difference to me. But then that's because I've ran businesses rather than just been self-employed. I actually support the government in this because it will... yeah, and the Labour government. So fucking hell, that's a big statement for me. Actually, I think it was Conservatives that probably brought this in before, like, would planned it. But anyway, let's not get too political. My point is that I see this as a professionalization of businesses, of small self-employed businesses. So I see that as a plus sign. I see that as a positive impact, because this is going to help separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, because there will be lots of people that have no idea how to document what they're actually doing. They earn the £12,500 a year, but manage to go on 6 holidays and drive a nice car. Like we all know people that basically just bumble along, make it up. And I see it as an unfair sort of way of running. So I see making it harder and more professional as a good thing. And then this feeds into the people that want to employ, because again, it's going to fuel, these people are going to be like, well, sod that, I ain't paying £2,000 for an accountant and not understand it. I ain't paying my taxes every quarter or whatever it is. I can't, and some people just can't understand it. One of the reasons why I think they should lower the VAT threshold as well. I think that's going to come as a matter of course. I don't know if this was on a Wayne's World or whether it was on a podcast, but with the VAT threshold, going off on a tangent, but I'm going to quickly finish it. I'm torn with whether it should be raised or lowered, because I think lowering it will level the playing field and make small self-employed people be more professional and choose whether it's right for them. When you're running an actual business, it's not for everybody. So it might shift it there. But then I also see raising it might be also helpful, as in like raising it substantially to say like 200,000, £250,000, something like that, could also give people time and let people grow in to being a business owner. So I'm a little bit torn on that side, but overall, what's your take on what I've just said there, Andy?
Yeah, I'm exactly positioned. I'm maybe slightly pivoted more to lowering it, because again, this is that huge divide in the industry that we have of, I say a huge divide. It's still always going to be or is currently a bigger lean towards the one-man band style, who are massively opposed to it. However, the guys like we've got in off the tools, and the guys that are more serious about it pivot across to the actually, yes, it should be lowered, because I'm trying to do things properly. I want to make proper money, and therefore we want to level the playing field. Because again, what's happening is, and I don't know if guys have actually noticed this, while they have slowly raised the VAT threshold over time, it is nowhere near lifting with inflation. Nowhere near. So what they don't realize is the continuation of ducking below the threshold is actually causing them to reduce how much money they are making year on year. Combine that with how difficult it now is to operate as a cash business. It becomes harder and harder to, let's say, again, duck under the threshold through that means. And as a result, you're actually, it's it's kind of lowering itself in a way anyway. Just
yeah.
in a very sneaky, less obvious way. And again, it's a constant conversation on the forums of how people say. I was laughing. There was one on the other day, and it was like the most of them were sort of like, "Yeah, fuck that. I'll just take longer off in the summer."
Yeah.
Like, it's such a closed mindset with so many people. Oh, I'll just, I'll have more time off or whatever it might be, and that's fine for some people. But as long as you're understanding that you're actually indirectly paying for that time off, and you don't perhaps realize it, trying to stay under that threshold. Again, if you're happy doing it, you're happy doing it. But if you have aspirations, then you fall into that camp of actually, yes, it should be lowered. I personally think it should be lowered to something between, let's say, 20 and 40 grand.
Yeah. Yeah. So my next statement was going to be, I would go extreme. So making it 80 grand rather than 92 or whatever, 80 is pointless. I would go 30 or 200. That to me, they've got to go a bold statement one way or the other and see what happens, because sticking it where it is now, and this is a really complicated subject, but like you said, it's actually lowering every year anyway, because it hasn't technically kept up with inflation. What if you could, like, hypothetically, what is it now, 85 or is it 92? I think it's 85, isn't it?
I'll double check.
Can't bloody remember. Let's say it's 85, right? Just for this argument's sake. So 10 years ago, 85 grand was a lot more money. So for those that don't understand inflation, basically it devalues the pound, right? So every pound is worth slightly less every time that there's inflation, whether the government print money, whether it's a slow in the economy, whatever it might be. So it's actually, all it does is just squeeze the self-employed person, because it just makes it harder for them if they're trying to battle staying under it, because they don't want the headaches of it. I just see it in no man's land at the minute, and it frustrates me. I definitely think that the next budget needs to address this, because it's just out of control like it is at the minute.
The other point I didn't make either about how it's obviously it's not gone up in line with inflation, so it's actually shaving away. The cost of materials has gone up massively as well. This is the other secret sort of weapon that is being used so that, again, the guys that are, okay, it's different. There's hacks. You can get the customers to buy materials, things like that. However, if you're supplying your stuff, if this is the VAT threshold, and this is your material cost, and your material cost is this, the piece that's left at the top for your profit gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So it's going to force a lot of them up. So then you left with limited choices at that point. So you are forced to actually, well, I'm going to have to go over the top. The problem with it, and why it's such a massive thing in the industries that we mainly work with, heating and electrics, is it's such a accurate price point for the one-man band that it's a big thing. You know what I mean? Maybe some of the different trades and construction businesses, it's never a thing. If you're a builder, for example, and you're doing a couple of extensions a year, you're way past it. It's nothing, isn't it? You know what I mean? Conversely, if you're maybe a plasterer or a painter and decorator, where the material costs is virtually nothing, as opposed to, 2 grand for a boiler or whatever it might be, then they probably can make their turnover can be really, really close to their profit. So they're probably happy to, okay, I'll make the 85 grand a year, and I'm fine with that. It's this industry that's problematic for.
Any service based, like reactive sort of small, even down to like even down to like barbers, like fucking dog walkers, car cleaners, and all of that. It all plays a part into it, doesn't it? But mainly like I'd say heating and electrics has got to be one of the lower gross profit margin, like, because there's so much material costs, isn't there, you know, involved.
Shit's expensive
generally,
in, that,
you know,
in them games, isn't it? You know what I mean? You know, you
could quite easily buy $5,000 worth of material and there only be $2 or $3 grand worth of labor, for argument's sake. If you're buying a CDI unvented cylinder, 6 designer radiators, you're at 5-6 grand, didn't you? You know, and it might only be 3 days work, for example. So the labor, it completely skews the metrics, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's why it's such a prevalent subject in this you know, the games that we just addressed, the heating and electric side of things. It's really on that price point where even dropping it to, I would say, 60 grand would have enough of an effect on them two industries, wouldn't it? Obviously it would be different with the others. It would then become a bigger problem. So the big problem that it is now for the two industries we just spoke about, lowering it down to something like 50-60 would then create a bigger problem for the other ones we've just spoke about, the plasterers and the painters and decorators, where the material cost is really, really low and it's all labor based. So then the next option again is, like you say, they go really heavy with it and they drop it right down to, let's say, 30 grand, whereas then you're left with perhaps your people who, and this is to finish on what I want to say about it, this is why I think it should be dropped to sort of 30 grand, is because it will allow the self-employed, the
cupcake maker, or the
you beat me to it. So the cake makers, the dog walkers, the things like that do it as maybe they do it in between the school run, they do things like that, and it's not their entire be all and end all. It's not a full business. It's not their life. Like a lot of heating engineers who are self-employed, it is their life. It becomes a separate thing, an individual thing, a bit on the side for some people, and that is more than enough threshold for them to do that. If you're only operating 10 till 2 in between the school runs making cakes, then you're unlikely to really breach that 30 grand. And if you do, then it's probably become a full-time business, and that's the, you know what I mean?
And then
and then, you know, hats off to you, go for it, and then you can go all in. When it's at a difficult value level, you're really left with that choice again. So at the minute it's 90. So you've got the lads in the heat and electrics have a choice of, well, I either earn 89,999, or the reality is you need to then earn over 120 to make it worthwhile for all the extra effort, the chopping the VAT off in the first place, the accounting costs and things like that. So you've got that's a big fucking jump, that 90 to 120. It's a big jump, and a lot of people are like, well, where am I going to find that extra work? So it's a super interesting one. But there's a few points that we've discussed there where it all comes back to the start of the conversation, which is the change in the game that we're going to see over the next decade, isn't it? So many things in place.
It's all going to play part of it, isn't it? And that leads us on, really, I guess, to like the next sort of like thing that we sort of touched on at the beginning is that skills gap. I know you obviously highlight it quite a lot, Andy. So just explain your sort of take on what you mean by that, like, and how you see that affecting the sort of general industry that we all operate in.
So there's two sides to this. So I'll mention the more obvious one first, which is the skills within the actual industry itself. Because as I said before, you're getting a lot more laser focused guys coming in. So they'll come into the game, they'll specifically train to do heat pumps, or they'll specifically train for service and repair, and then they'll go and get a job with, you know, a company that has maybe a social housing contract, or they'll go and work for a division of a company that in that individual division. You know, I've got lads in my team who exclusively do service and repair, and then lads that exclusively do installation. They don't cross over. So there's a very laser focus for that. What's probably the more prevalent point in terms of a contributor to the industry is the lack of sort of tradey skills, if you want to call it that, / DIY skills from the population. So I have spoke about this before, so I'll try and condense it a little bit. But essentially, what's happened over the last 50 years, so it kind of happened about 50 to 60 years ago, the cost of entry to university, both academically and financially, began to reduce. And there's various nuances to it. Obviously, the government want more people into university. Schools and colleges want more people to stay in the education system, because obviously education system is a business. So schools get paid for how many go to college, colleges get paid for how many go to university, and stats and things like that. But essentially what's then happened is a lot of people who are in the 50s who have children in their 20s, the breakdown of skills where, let's say, your granddad could probably build the wall and, you know, do X, Y, and Z and do some plumbing in the house and change a toilet, then teaches some of that to his son, so in the 50-odd-year-old window, who then passes it on. If that 50-odd-year-old person has then gone to university and not really dabbled in that skill set and started the beginning of the process of outsourcing, I will use a tradesman for that and that and that,
Yeah.
then bring on the 20-odd-year-old who's then dad, 50-odd-year-old dad, didn't develop that tradie DIY skill set.
Yeah.
There's a massive removal then of what granddad was capable of to what they're capable of.
Yeah.
Down to, you know, there was a post the other week about a handyman in London charging 300 odd quid to put a shelf up, or someone putting a flat pack kit up from IKEA and charging for it, because that skills has become so removed. So what's actually happening is there is an increase in demand for specialized trades. So it's actually this curve is actually going to start going back up now. So it's an angle that I don't think a lot of guys are looking at, but that's going to happen even more so as time goes on. Again, in the next 10 years, the 20, 30-year-old people who start to buy their own house, they just don't know what to do. So a lot of people don't know how to turn the water off in their house, for example, or reset the
even
toilet
bleeding
off.
a radiator and that. People just haven't been past that knowledge, have they? You know,
No.
And it's such a simple thing. Like, and what I take out of that is the opportunity, you know, because it just means, we all know, I think you know the stat specifically, is it for every 100 that leave the industry, only like 50 come in? Is it something like that?
It was, yeah, basically it starts off with being 4,000 leave and 1,000 come back in, and then it's broken down. So it's the same stats as what you're saying, where you can just strip it right down to 1 to 4, and then a portion of that, let's say 50, something like 15 to 20% of them then go and do something like exclusively do heat pumps or renewables.
So like narrows into,
which for, again, the bulk of UK houses, by quite a bit, still have gas or oil systems in the house. But yeah, so the flip side of that is more demand from customers and less supply in the industry. So what it's creating, this massive opportunity, and the topic of today kind of feeds into it, of the guys who do want to do it properly and really create a proper little business from it, little, small, medium, whatever they want to get it to. There's so much opportunity.
Yeah. As long as you're putting yourself in the right positions, you know, and that you're organized and you're professional. Because to caveat that, though, like we all know that 25 to 40-year-old customer, like, as a generalization, I know it's not everybody, but they're impatient fuckers, isn't they? Most of us listening are in that age. If we want something, we want it. We want it now. You know, we don't want to wait 3 weeks to get a call back and whatever. So again, back to earlier points, you know, the opportunity is going to be there. There's going to be an abundance of work. There's going to be I believe there's going to be a better choice of engineers and people to work for your business, because I think it's shifted from being a sort of like employees market to an employers market, which basically means it gives the owners more choice. I believe that's growing. And if you've got the right systems and you've got the right organization and you're doing all of the things that you would expect, then the opportunity is just humongous. Absolutely. You know, we, as an industry, plumbing and electrical, general, you know, obviously other trades are included, but I'll focus mainly on those.
Just getting the stats, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm doing.
Okay, excellent.
Anyone who's watching watching the video can see my eyes going around the screen. I'm just trying to pull the stats. But sorry, mate.
I thought it was just your ADHD kicking in, mate, and you was just finding a shiny object.
That kicks in. You know, that's kicked in when I don't show up.
Yeah, we can earn. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say there is, we can earn solicitor level money without solicitor or doctor level money, without that level of commitment into and the debt that's accrued to get to that level. You know, realistically, what if you're lucky enough to, this brings us on to apprenticeships, right? So that's another point. But if you're lucky enough to have an apprenticeship or whatever, then you're getting your training funded. Okay, so let's use that one as the example for starters, right? You come out of school at 16 and you manage to get an apprenticeship, which is very, very difficult, which is part of the problem in the economy. But let's say you're that lucky person. By the time you're 21, right, you're 5 years in, you're qualified, you haven't had to pay for that qualification. You've been paid to get that fucking qualification, and you can be earning 70, 80, 100 grand at the ages of 20 to 21 if you're dedicated, right? Change it a little bit. Let's say you're an older person, or you didn't go straight from school and you've had to fund it, right? You can fund a gas qualification for around 10 to 15K, okay? Put that into context. That's not even a year's unit. I believe, you know, time you factor in bed, board, food, living, you know, the actual tuition fees. So for worst case scenario, even if you're a retrainer and you're funding this yourself, let's say 15 grand, you can spend that money and be a fully fledged engineer very, very quickly, earning, even if you went and got a job, right? The average job now is between 40 and 45K, right? That is on par with entry-level solicitors and doctors and that, as they're breaking into the industry. You know, obviously over the time, and if they specialize, they can earn more money. I get that. But most professional industries like that, it takes to 35 till they're earning actually any serious money. You can do that by the time you're 22. No questions asked. You can have like, I bought my first house at 19. At 19 years old. It wasn't a house, it was a flat. I didn't come from money. I lived in a council estate in Luton. You know, I didn't get given anything. So there's no reason why this industry isn't it should be so more attractive. But the mindset of the school system, the mindset of that older generation of parents and that, it's always been downgraded, isn't it? Oh, you're a tradesman. Oh, like, you know, and it just baffles my brain. But that leads me on to the apprenticeships and stuff. It's that's the one big lag that this industry is facing, and will fuel people like us that are already qualified, because it is so difficult to get an apprenticeship in this day and age, you know, because there's not enough people can afford it, which comes back to all of the fucking points that we've made with not pricing correctly, not having an organized professional business. But also it's just a ball ache, you know, who, like, generally, like, taking on a 16, 17-year-old person out of school, it's hard work, isn't it, Andy? It's a nightmare.
Yeah, another controversial statement that I sort of say is, for the guys that want to do things properly, and it's a big shame, this, because you want to pass on those skills, but it's actually no longer financially viable to take on an apprentice. You have to do it because you want to do it, sort of goodness of your heart, you know, bringing more people in, because there's always been that ambiguity with an apprentice anyway. Are they going to be any good? Are they going to go through their entire time, serve their entire time? Are they going to stay with me when they're done? And you know, are they going to be good enough to be an employee even when they've completed it? But by the government increasing the minimum wage, what's actually happened is it's closed the gap between a newly qualified apprentice and a fully qualified time served been in the game 10 plus years, engineer. And if you're looking at it again, not from a personal perspective, but from a business perspective, then it actually makes more sense to just take on a fully qualified, experienced guy and send him straight out into the field making you money. You've not got to spend 4 or 5 or whatever it is years. You know what I mean? The gap, the pay gap's dropped so much. You better just getting the qualified guy out and making money on him. Like, you know, what does he need? A couple of weeks to learn your systems and software, and away you go.
Because like in this day and age, right? And please don't take offense to this if you're in this age bracket, but like men, obviously the majority of this industry is men, right? So I appreciate there's women as well, but I'm a man. I know what I've got sons and I've got daughters as well. But kids don't grow up like they used to. You know, boys are boys a lot longer. So realistically, a lot of young people won't actually fall into what they want to do until their early 20s, right? And minimum wage now for an early 20s year old is what, like 26.5K or something? It's something like that. Mate, there is no way businesses can afford to pay a 22-year-old guy fresh out of a freaking college or university or whatever they've done for them first few years to be an apprentice, is it? It's just impossible. This is where the government, and this is where I get my true points on the government, drop the ball. And this is all governments. They've done this for probably generations, is that it just makes it impossible to maintain that skill because it's just not financially viable into taking that time to train someone anymore, because the costs, the insurances, just getting, like my son's 19, right? And if I want to get him in a van tomorrow, it's going to cost me £2,500 in insurance. Just in insurance.
£12.71 as of April this year is the minimum wage.
It's just unbelievable. And I understand it has to be because of cost of living and inflation. I get all of that, but all it's doing is pushing problems further down the line, because by that minimum wage, that one decision will stop hundreds, if not thousands, of people being able to retrain and get into an industry like plumbing, like electrical, like heating. And then as a consequence, you know, it just puts pressure on the whole industry, doesn't it? And again, for us that are qualified, it's a fucking positive, because there's just going to be an abundance of opportunity, because every year that passes, there's less and less able people to be able to solve those problems for people. Yeah. But that's a very short-sighted view, because obviously we all want to, you know, be in business longer than a few years. You know, this is a long term for most of us. It's a career. It's a lifetime of building something so that you can build the life that you want. And I just like, something has to give. Something has to give in the trades and construction industry, because why is it acceptable that the government will pay tens of thousands of pounds to send kids to college, right? And ultimately, most of them, if they're trade colleges, they come out with fuck all. It's a qualification on paper. It ain't getting you a job. What gets you the job is the 2-year portfolio that you've built up and experience that you've built up. That ultimately, yes, I know there's fast track. I know there's nuances to it. So I'm generalizing here. But why are we expected, as you can tell, I'm passionate about this. Why are we expected as business owners to fund someone's career when the universities don't fucking fund it? They have to be, unless you're in Scotland, obviously, then the government fund it. But you look at like the rest of the world, like America, England, Australia. I'm presuming it's the same in Australia. That was a guess. The person is expected to fund it, or the family, right? Yeah. So some people come from family that save up and pay for their children's tuitions. I get that. That's brilliant. Great opportunity. Brilliant. Love that. If not, you straddle yourself with debt and you get qualified. Why is it not the same in this industry? I just don't get it. Why should I have to pay out £12.71 an hour to then take time, you know, effort, responsibility to train that person? It just doesn't make any logical sense to do it, does it?
So it's like, let's make the numbers simple and say it's 26 grand a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you pay strongly in your game and you pay 41 grand a year for an employed guy, plus the obvious benefits, he gets a van and all that, that's pretty much expected to pay around that for it to be a nice, there's plenty of companies paying 35 or whatever, but let's say it's 41. There's a 15 grand disparity or increase there.
Yeah.
So when you look at the stats and look what a qualified engineer can bring in for the business, it's a hell of a lot more than 15 grand more in profit. Yeah. And they don't need the babysitting and all that sort of stuff. It's just no longer worth it. So this is also going to dive bomb the industry. And again, to come back to what we said before, the companies and the guys that are doing it right will really benefit from this. They will not only will they be scooping up the work from the guys that aren't doing it properly, they'll find that the demand's increasing and more customers will be needing the work. So it'll actually have a compound effect, because there's less guys coming into the industry, no apprentices. That's why there's that 4,000 leaving, retiring, changing roles, whatever, but only 1,000 coming in. It's just going to really, really build momentum. I mean, I spotted this a few years ago when I came back into the industry, sort of like 3 years ago, and it's starting to really build on the momentum side of things now. Really, really build. When I have my meeting with my office manager and get the feedback for the week, we're getting more and more of I used to use this guy and I can't get hold of him, or he's retired, or he's got a different job, or he's working for someone. We get more and more of that over time. So yeah.
Just to circle back on the university disparity here, right? I just Googled quickly. So the average higher education debt that someone leaves university with is £53,000 in the last financial year. Okay. £53,000 that person has had to fund one way or another, right? Through government, through loans, through parents, one way or another, someone's had to pay that, right? 2 years on minimum wage, which 2 years is a short time to really learn an industry anyway. So is already that. So we're expected as business owners to pay that money to that person to train them. Why is it acceptable? I just don't understand. Why is it acceptable for the universities to leave that young generation with that debt, right? But we are expected to straddle that cost in this industry. I'm not saying the solution is that the person should fund it. But if they have to fund it in university, why is it not the same expectation in this industry? Ideally, it would be funded via the government. But I understand, obviously, economies are economies. There are costs. And, I get that we live in a world that doesn't quite work like that. We're a capitalist country. I believe like in Sweden and places like that, they get free education or funded education up to the age of 30. So I get there are other models out there, but we can only play to the rules that we're playing it in. We're in the UK. It's the place that we live in. So I see the only solution is in the short term is to move that burden onto the person, because they're ultimately the ones that are benefiting. And some people will disagree with that, and I get that, but I think that if they don't do something radical like that, then we are just going to see a huge economic decline in everything. There's going to be to the point where you just can't get people, and then that just drives the price up, which for qualified people, great, great. We'll be charging 250 quid an hour. I don't give a shit. Don't bother me. I'm all right, Jack,
Yeah, within I think by 2030, if things don't change, you'll be paying £400 an hour for a gas engineer.
I'm not quite as extreme on
There's-
it as that. But
there's nuances, of course.
Yeah.
Like it depends
but
on.
I think there will be a position, because it ultimately, right, if you've got water pissing through your ceiling and the guy that answers the phone, because not everyone fucking answers the phone, and if you're busy, you're not answering the phone, if you're not organized, etc., then that price will go up. So again, for us, it's great opportunity, isn't it? And that's why solicitors can charge what they charge, because guess what? You can't just ring a solicitor and get hold of one, because there's a smaller amount of them. There's not as many of them that are available. And again, I don't want to be short-sighted and just sit here and say, well, I'm all right, because ultimately, right, I'm all right. I don't give a shit, because I know I'm going to be in work for the rest of my life, as long as health lets me. I'm going to be able to just keep charging more and more and more. But that's not the type of person I am. I want to see my son and his friends thrive. I want to see people improve their life. I don't want to be the gatekeeper to that, just because because the government aren't there, or the people can't afford to get into the industry. It's just not a fair situation to be in.
It'll just implode as well. Like, you know what I mean? If they, if apprentices are no longer viable, what's going to happen to that 1,000 to 4,000 stats that we said? It's going to nosedive, innit? It's going to be catastrophic. And I do stand by that statement. Okay, the nuances for that £400 an hour are going to be more tied to the reactive work, because you're going to get because the availability of companies and engineers is going to be massively reduced. It's going to become more of a, well, I can get you at the end of the week. Whereas then it's like, well, actually, for the guys that have got a few members of the team, it's like, well, yeah, we can get to you today, but it's £400 plus that for an hour's labor for a reactive call out. You know what I mean? Because that's and that's going to be. It's not that it's not a thing now. Plenty of companies charge that now anyway. The call out companies charge that anyway. But it's going to become much more of a norm from your normal.
But then it compounds, doesn't it? Because when things like that happen, when day-to-day costs rise, guess what? Inflation rises, and guess what? Minimum wage has to rise, because the government are under pressure. So you're then just compounding that problem even further, because their minimum wage will be 35 grand a year. So then getting into that industry is then made even more difficult. But it's just, I know I'm not stupid. I'm not naive. I know it's very, very difficult for any operation, so government, business, whatever it is. I know there's so much more that needs to be factored in, but we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. The cost of living is ridiculous. The cost of employing people is ridiculous. The skills gap is growing. These are all compounding and compounding. Every single year that goes by, there is just more. This is just getting worse. And we've lived in relative, obviously, and I thank every serviceman that has ever served, but relatively, we've lived in peacetime, right? Our whole generation and our parents have it directly peacetime, as in we haven't had hardship in our actual country, right? So we think that that's normal, right? You go back to 1939, 1940, right? We weren't in that world. You go back to 1914, sorry. We weren't in that world. You go back to early 1900s. We weren't in that world. You go back into the 1800s, every 10, 20 years. We are one of the only generations, the last 50 to 60 years, that have lived in relative peace. And like I say, I'm not naive. I know there's wars going on. I know there's not peace. But from a day-to-day living perspective, we have not had any hardship. We haven't had 3-day work weeks. We haven't had rationing. We haven't had clothing being made out of fabric, like it was in the 20s and everything. We don't know what it's like to be under pressure. And we seem to think that because we've got technology, because we've all got iPhones, and because we generally all aren't starving to death, and we have food, and there's a welfare system, and there's the NHS, we think that is normal. That isn't normal for history. That's normal for the last, say, 80 years. right? Go back any further than that, kids used to fucking die, you know, because they couldn't get fed, or the mums would die because they didn't have anesthetic to get rid of an infection after birth. You know, kids were going up mines, for fuck's sake, not up mines, down mines, up chimneys. And I genuinely, I don't want to be apocalyptic here, but bad times will come again. And we are in this bubble of security, and I just genuinely worry about the next 20 to 30 years, because this fiat money system can't go on. The way things are governed can't go on forever. It just can't. It never has. It never has in any time of history has it ever lasted. So when shit hits the fan, we're not going to know what to do. And I pray to God that it's not war. I pray to God it's not fucking something really bad, but it will get bad at some point. It's only going to, and all of these decisions that are going to be being made aren't helping the situation. It's just fueling a decline in the economy, a decline in people's well-being, in people's mentality. And I'm going completely off on a tangent, so I'll reverse it in now. But my ultimate point is, you know, life ain't always going to be like this and be fairly easy, you know, and it worries me. It really does. It really worries me where our leaders are coming from, where life is, you know. Complete tangent.
Words of wisdom.
I'll have to re-listen to that, because I think I went around in about 7 different blocks there. But yeah, right. I hope I'm wrong. I do hope I'm wrong, and I do hope that we continue to thrive as a society. But I can't see it. I see the state of the just not even the younger generation. I see I speak to a lot of people. You know, life is getting tougher for people growing up. Life is getting tougher for those that are grown up, and we're not resilient. We're not as resilient as a generation as we were 50, 80 years ago, and it really does worry me what is going to happen. But on a positive note, as with history, people change, economies change, and there will be good times on that journey as well.
And the solution is get the right coaching for your business.
Yeah, well, yeah. Short-sightedly, you've always got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You know, you can't help other people until you are helping yourself, and that starts with you. You know, and one of the driving factors of what created Off the Tools was to help people navigate all of these challenges and all of these opportunities, because you know there are challenges and there are opportunities, and we're here to help people where we can. Hopefully these sort of episodes make you think about not just business but life in a different way, and let you understand that it's very easy to be tunnel visioned and just, you know, what you know is what you know, and the minute you broaden that sight line, the world becomes a little bit easier, and decisions become a little bit more based on real information rather than gut feelings. And Off the Tools is part of that journey for a lot of people. Hopefully more people. You know, we're always welcome to new members, so feel free to jump out and come and join our movement.
I think what I'm getting at more is it doesn't always have to be, you know, one of the various levels of coaching that we offer. It can just be surrounding yourself with people with the right mindset.
100%.
As we said before, you know, so many, you know, the lads in the group, they get as much from, maybe not quite as much, but they used to get an awful lot from just being around the other members as they do from me and you as coaches, because you're then, rather than surrounding yourself with your classic UK tradesman keen to get to the pub on a Friday and just moan about the industry, instead of that, you surround yourself with people who are having conversations like we've just had of, holy shit, there's going to be some opportunities going. let's dial in, let's turn this into a proper business kind of thing. And as I say, there's going to be plenty of you lads out there who are probably perhaps playing at it at the minute, but know that you're either destined for more or understand that there's a lot of opportunity that's going to become available in the next few years, and want to really nail in on things, and just reach out and have a conversation with me or Wayne, or both of us. We both have, as much as we have in common, we also have different viewpoints and angles and strategies of attacking things. We can have a conversation, all of us together, and offer some advice, no commitment. So yeah, reach out. Don't think you're alone in this industry. It can be really challenging. So yeah, just reach out. We're always available to have a chat.
Definitely. Right. To end this session, let's end it on an optimistic note. If you are currently a skilled engineer, technician, tradesman, whatever you call yourself, the future does look bright. We have the skill sets in these hands and in this brain to really thrive and really make a fantastic life for ourselves if we apply it in the right direction and we do the right things. I hope you've enjoyed today. It's been a real pleasure to talk with Andy about just more of a general conversation. I know we've gone around in lots of different areas. Hopefully you found value, and we'll call it a day. God bless everyone.